Hi, welcome back. Our previous lesson was on the market labor supply. Today we'll be moving on to market structure. What is market structure? Market structure refers to the organizational and competitive characteristics of a market. It simply describes the number and size of firms in an industry, the nature of the products they produce, and the ease of entry into and exit from a particular market. Now, why is market structure important? It's important because it shapes your market power, which is the ability for any firm to raise their price without losing any sales to competing industries. The more the market power you have, the higher the price you can charge. Now, let's look at an example of this. Assuming you own the only grocery store in town within 20 miles. Now, you may have a lot of market power because of this, because very few of your customers will be willing to drive maybe 20 miles for a slightly cheaper groceries. But if you own one of six grocery stores within that 20 miles, then your market power may be lower because if you raise your price, people can easily go to your competitors and buy from them. So the more firms that exist in a particular area, it's going to affect the market power that each firm will have. Now let's move into the type of market structure that exists. The first is perfect competition. One main characteristics of perfect competition is that firms in this market are selling an identical good. And there are also many sellers and many buyers in this market. And in this market, firms are price takers. So perfect competition is a market structure in which there are many sellers and many buyers in a particular industry selling very identical good. And this means that for each firm, they have a relatively small size of the market because there are a lot of them in the industry. So, because there are many sellers in this market and they are selling identical good, this means that for any particular firm, they have literally no market power. So, in perfect competition, the goods that the firms are selling are substitutes. So you can move from one firm to another and get the same kind of good. So in this case, a particular firm does not really have market power. So this firm are also price takers. What we mean by price takers is all of the firms in this market, they have to charge the prevailing price. When we were doing the equilibrium in the goods market, we saw that when the demand curve and the supply curve are equal, this is going to lead to an equilibrium in the market where we have an equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Now, in the perfect competitive market, sellers are bound to sell at this price because there are a lot of them in the market. If you raise your price above the equilibrium price, consumers will simply move to your competitor. And if you charge something below, it will not be optimal. So sellers in this market are price takers, which simply means that they take the price as it exists in the market. They do not have the power to change it. Now, an example of perfect competition is agricultural markets or stock markets. So if you think of agricultural markets, there are a lot of farmers that sell identical products like vegetables or fruits. In a particular area, you can have a lot of farmers selling agricultural products. So the price of such goods are usually fixed because if a farmer charges more, people will buy from their competitors. And if you look at an example like stock market, on any given day, there are thousands of people selling identical stock in any stock market. So the price, if you are to increase the price, people will go and buy from your competitors. So now let's move on to the next market structure. The next market structure is monopoly. Monopoly arises when there is only one seller in the market. And due to that firm being the only seller in the market, it gives them a lot of market power. So market power usually comes from the competition that you have and how much you can differentiate your good from your competitor. So in a monopoly, consider a given area where you are the only seller in that market. So your firm is also the industry in that market because you are the only person in that industry. This gives you a lot of market power. So you can charge as high as you want, and people do not have any other choice but to buy from you. And this means that you are also not a price taker. So in a monopoly, they are not price takers. They have the power to influence the price without losing a significant amount of their customers. One thing that constitutes a monopoly is also high barriers to entry. So usually we have monopolies in markets because of many factors, and one of these is because there is high barrier to entry or exit in that market. Now we will look in detail about things that causes barriers to entry or exit in the market in our next lessons. An example of a monopoly is local utilities. So you may have electricity or water or gas. Usually these are supplied by one single firm in a particular area. So this gives them some monopoly and also market power in that area that they operate. The next market structure that we will look at is oligopoly. Oligopoly is sort of between monopoly and perfect competition. So it occurs when there are few firms that dominate the market. It's not like monopoly where we have one seller, and it's not perfect competition where there are many sellers, but then few or a handful of sellers in the market. So because there are a handful of large sellers in the market, this gives them some monopoly power, which gives them some market power as well. So they can influence the price to some level, but not as much as a monopolist can, because they do have competition, but the competition is not as high as it is in perfect competition. Now, another thing is they do not sell identical products like the perfect competition, but their product can be differentiated. Now, what this means is you can see two similar products that are not identical, like fruits or vegetables, but they serve similar purposes. But maybe because of branding or some other perks that an industry will add to their product, it slightly differentiates them from the other firm's product. Now, one example of oligopoly is automobile industry. You can have two cars, both saloon cars, but because of branding, consumers may have one that they prefer to the other. Now, the two are serving the same purposes, which is transporting you from one place to another. But because the two products are slightly differentiated, consumers can decide that, okay, this is what I want as compared to the other one. Now, another example of oligopoly is soft drink industry. So you do not have a lot of them like in perfect competition. You have just a few or a handful of large sellers that are dominating any particular market. Then the next market structure we'll be looking at is monopolistic competition. So this is also quite similar to oligopoly, which is between monopoly and perfect competition. So this is when we have many small to medium-sized firms. So it's not one seller like in the monopoly, and it's not many sellers like in the perfect competition, and it's not few large sellers like oligopoly, but they are small to medium-sized firms that dominate the market. Now, with their product, it can be somewhat differentiated, just like we have in oligopoly. So because of this, they have limited control over price. And this is also due to relatively easy entry and exit in the market. Now, an example of monopolistic competition is retail or restaurants or clothing industry, you'll find that even though there are not so many of them in a particular market like we'll have in a perfect competition, in a particular area you have a few restaurants that are small or medium size or even large. Now we can see from what we have discussed that there is a trend here. Market power increases from one market structure to another. Now, let's look at what we mean by market power first, and then we will look at the spectrum of market power. So, market power is simply the firm's relative ability to manipulate the price of an item in the market, or it is a firm's ability to increase the price above the competitive level without losing a significant number of customers. So if you are a firm and you can influence the market above what the market has decided, and you do not lose a significant number of your customers, then you have market power. Now let's look at the spectrum of market power relating to the different market structure. So the two extreme ends are perfect competition and monopoly. And then we have oligopoly and monopolistic competition in the middle. So if we start from perfect competition, they have the least market power. What does this mean? They have many sellers in a market selling very identical goods. So this means that there are many competitors and then they sell identical products. This gives them very little market power because if you increase the price of your good above the competitive level, people will just simply go to the next person down the road and buy exactly the same good. So you cannot influence the market because you are selling an identical good to your thousands of competitors. Now, the next bit is imperfect competition, which comprises of monopolistic competition and oligopoly. Now, this is a bit difficult to differentiate sometimes. So when we come look at oligopoly, they have few competitors. So we mentioned that there are a handful of large sellers in the market. So for a particular region, there may be just a few of them that are large in size serving that particular region. So even though competition exists, it's not as tight as perfect competition. And also in oligopoly, we have differentiated products. So the product may be serving a similar purpose, but then branding may differentiate one from another. So this gives them a bit of market power. You can influence your price, and people might still buy it because consumers may have a preference of your product over the other product. And this is a similar case for monopolistic competition, but which they also sell somewhat differentiated product, and these are medium-sized firms that are serving a particular market. So we have monopolistic and oligopoly in the middle with a bit of market power more than the perfect competition because they have some competition and then they also sell somewhat differentiated products. Then the other extreme case is monopoly. So monopolies have the most market power because they do not have competitors. They are the only sellers in the market, and they also sell unique products. So because they don't have competitors, their product is unique. No other seller is selling that product in that market. So this gives them a lot of market power. They can charge really high prices above the competitive level, and people still will have to buy it because they do not have an option. There's no substitute. There are no other competitors selling the same product. So you still have to buy from that monopolist because they are the only one in the market. So this is all that we have on our lesson on market structure. Our next lesson will be on setting prices when you have market power. If you enjoyed today's lesson, consider subscribing. Thank you.